Hello, hello, people of the interweb. We are back for Pride. Woohoo!
Woo!
It's getting gay in here. So keep on all your clothes. We are on YouTube, so we don't want to break the algorithm. Um, Welcome to Dangerous Dialogue for Pride. I am Tom. I'm not tone deaf, as my singing would make you think. And I'm joined by two wonderful people today, Edward and Jack, who will introduce themselves in just a sec. This month, we're celebrating all things Pride because it is Pride Month after all. As you can tell by this surprisingly dark flag in the background, I thought it was a little bit lighter. Maybe I just need more light in my life, which this conversation may bring, or maybe not, because we're talking about marriage equality today. One of the things that is, I'm Italian suddenly now as well, one of the things that is so important to us in Pride Month is that we remember that Pride was born out of anger and frustration, and it's great that we celebrate during Pride Month, but we continue to make progress because of it, and that's why we're here to talk today, talk about what marriage equality is, what it means, and why in Pride Month it's so important for us to try and assess in the arts how we make progress. I can already feel my voice fading, so I'm going to have to throw over to someone else. Edward, who are you? Where are you from?
I am Edward Dickens, and I am from the northeast of Scotland, but my family are from all over the place, hence the strange accent. And I am not 406, as my demeanor and hairline might make you think. I'm in my mid-20s. I'm gay.
Whoa. You're in your mid-20s now.
I'm in my mid-20s now. I've known you for 10 years, Tom.
Wow. Goodness me. Okay, wow, that's a lot to unpack, and we'll do a dangerous dialogue on that. But over to Jack. Who are you? What's your jam? Where are you from?
Hello, my name is Jack. I'm living in London currently, but I'm from the Midlands originally. I'm 29, and I realised, speaking of Pride, I've actually been a practicing gay for 10 years now, because I came out when I was 19. Crazy. I know. I'm ready for my plaque.
I wonder if they do those, the blue plaques, except they're like in pride flag colors.
That'd be great, I think.
I have seen one of those, but I'll come back to that later, actually.
Really?
Yes, I have seen one, but I've just realized it's for a topic that's very relevant to questions we'll probably come on to, so I'll come back to that.
Love that. Okay, so let's just jump straight in. Today we're talking about marriage equality, and I feel like we should clarify what marriage equality is. I mentioned that I was doing this dangerous dialogue tonight to some people. I mentioned it to my mother, actually, who is an incredibly clever person, more clever than I will ever be. And she was like, oh, there's no such thing. And I was like, yes, in some countries there isn't. And she was like, no, but once you're married, there isn't equality. And I was like, oh, well, you've misunderstood what marriage equality is. And I had to explain that is equal marriage for people who are not opposite sex marrying each other. So what we're talking about is people of the same gender having the legal right to get married. And that is what we're defining as kind of marriage equality, I guess. I think as queer people, we often have to justify why marriage is something that is important to us, because I don't know, that feels like a question that comes up a lot. It's like, oh yeah, we can get married, the heterosexual people. Why is it so important to you? Why do you want our thing? I guess this is a question I kind of want to put to everyone is, why is it so important to have equal marriage? Go on, Edward.
Okay, I was going to let Jack jump in if he wanted to, but I can go first if you'd like.
Go.
I think it's an interesting one. I mean, the first thing that springs to mind for me is the old joke about being gay is about fighting for rights you don't want. Get married, join the army. Well, not something I agree with, but it is a joke I'm fond of. The first thing that comes to mind when you ask why is it important for me, I'm going to leave religious things to the side for a moment. When I was preparing to get married myself, I'm no longer married. I'm afraid I'm widowed, but I do have the rings there still around my neck. the priest that married me is gay himself and is married to a man.
Mhm.
And he, in addition to being a priest, is also a high court judge. He likes to swap his hats a lot.
Wow.
And he was telling myself and my husband to be an interesting story about, I can't remember exactly who it was. I think it was a general in the army who had come to him, was gay and was openly gay and had been in a relationship a committed relationship for many years. And just after it was legalized, gay marriage, I mean, he came to Joe, the priest who married me, and said, we've been in a civil partnership, but I'm not really sure why I should upgrade it to a marriage. And Joe said, well, are you a religious man? And he said, no, neither of us are religious, so we don't see why we should go in for that. And he said, well, you're a general in the army, aren't you? And he said, yes. And he said, well, all the other generals get to take their wives to the Queen's garden parties and things like that, don't they? And he said, yes. I said, well, if you get married, then you can do the same with your husband. And he sort of went, oh, right, yeah. Hadn't thought of that. And so they got married. And I think that's an often overlooked part of it. I mean, we now have civil partnerships for heterosexuals, for one thing.
Yeah.
But personally speaking, I don't really see why we should continue to have them at all. And I suspect over time they'll begin to fade out, because whilst it does come with the same, more or less the same legal protections that marriage does, marriage is about a lot more than that. Even if you're not religious, even if you're having a secular marriage, it does have much more gravitas than a civil partnership does, not least because it's harder to end a marriage than it is to end a civil partnership. But anyway, that's a quick bit from me.
Love that. So much juice in there. Oh my days. And Jack, for you, why is equal marriage something that is important?
It's just to kind of the name in it, like being equal. Like why because of someone's sexuality or anything, why should it not be equal? I mean, it was only kind of within the last, I'm going to get this wrong, but the last kind of 60 years or so that people who are different races could get married to each other. And it's just like how the rules of marriage have changed so much. Like, it should be, why shouldn't it be equal? Why shouldn't it be a right for everybody? And also there's a kind of, this is a wider thing we could probably talk about later, is people who are consenting, people who are consenting and want and love each other and want to get married. Why shouldn't they be allowed to do that? When there are stories of people who, you hear about things like kind of maybe forced marriages, maybe there are some places where child marriage is legal right. Still. So it's kind of like, so why people who want to and are consenting to and love each other, why shouldn't they be allowed to? Why shouldn't they be allowed to? So.
I agree so much. I mean, like with both of you, it's that thought of to use the sort of crash joke that you said, Edward, is that perhaps it's not that you want to, but it's nice to have the option. And there will be plenty that do, and I'm sure I would love to one day. But I feel like equality as an ideal is something that we're striving towards, right? Not just with kind of LGBTQ plus rights, but just generally. You've mentioned kind of race. Obviously, we're all white here, but that is obviously something that there is an equality gap on. Gender, again, we are all men here, but there is that gap, and I feel like it's important to acknowledge those things. But the reason that we're kind of tooting the equal marriage thing is because it is something that is very inequitable in the world for us. I think it's that idea of being allowed. And Edward, you mentioned kind of the legal side of that already. And I think it's interesting, civil partnerships to most points have the same legal standing as a marriage now. Mostly, I mean, they are still separate things and they mean different things in many ways. So I guess the question is, if civil unions are legal and allowed, what's the point in a marriage? But as you've already said, there's that extra bit that comes with it. It's like, well, no, they are more than your partner. They're your husband or your wife, and that's important, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I've heard it described in a legal sense that a civil partnership is less a marriage, and it's more a long-term relationship that you've decided to put a contract in.
Yeah.
And some people might say that that's what a marriage is,
Yeah.
but it's not. I mean, okay, I think I'm not aware of the statistic, but it must be, from my own personal experience of working in religious circles, it must be at least 50% of modern marriages are secular. The ceremony is secular. I mean, it's a registry office, or it's a humanist celebrant, or whatever.
Yeah.
And some people, I'm not one of them, but some people in the church that I've spoken to don't really get the point, and they sort of say, whether you're gay or straight, why bother with the marriage if it's basically just a glorified civil partnership for you? And I think that really sort of misunderstands what marriage has become over the last couple of centuries in the public understanding. Okay, sure, in this country, the institution of marriage has been shaped historically by the church and by religious attitudes to marriage, but that cultural attitude has clung on. I mean, okay, if you have a non-religious marriage, it's not explicitly stated in most ceremonies that you are becoming one person. And in a Christian ceremony, for example, and in, I believe, Islamic ceremonies, it is explicitly stated you are becoming one person. You're no longer two people, you're now one.
Like the Spice Girls. Oh my God, sorry, it's Pride Month. To become one.
But even if you don't explicitly state that, a marriage comes with that gravitas in the modern understanding of it. That's the point I'm driving at.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I went and looked up some legal things on this before we chatted, and I was unaware that you are actually legally not allowed to call them your like husband or wife, because you're not allowed to say you're married when you're in a civil partnership, because you aren't married. Like legally, that is false. They are not that. A civil partnership, it was interesting when I was reading this stuff, I was like, oh, breaking it down, like the actual term is, it's a partnership, like any business transaction. It is a legal transaction, but it's civil. It's between two, as Jack said, kind of consenting adults. So yeah, I think it's interesting. I see a civil union more as a transactional type of thing. I don't want to demean anyone's civil union or whatever reason they've chosen to do that, but from what I can perceive, it seems to be slightly more transactional than of marriage. You think of love and ever after, and I'm romanticizing it, but you know.
I think you're absolutely right, though. I mean, for better or for worse, the culture at large has placed a distinction between these two forms of partnership, and there's a good reason why culture has done that.
So, Edward, to you, why in the end did you choose to have a marriage rather than a civil partnership?
Well, for us in particular, it was because of the religious aspect of it. I think Tom knows this, Jack won't know this, probably not anyway, and there's a good chance many viewers won't know this. You will know I'm religious because I've mentioned it already, and I've mentioned I've worked in church circles. You probably won't know that I'm in the very early stages of hopefully becoming a priest in the Episcopal Church in Scotland, which is more or less analogous to the Church of England, but we also do our own thing, and it's a bit complicated. I won't get into that just now. One of the things we do differently is that we have gay marriage. And my husband and I had been talking about getting married anyway, and the church changed the rules that if you were cohabiting but not married, you would not be. It wasn't anything to do with sexuality. It was just a question of if you were in a relationship with someone and cohabiting but not married, you would not be permitted to train from the ministry. And I came back from the meeting and said to my husband that they've changed the rules. And he said, well, we were thinking about getting married anyway. And I said, yes, we were. And then we got engaged. But over the next sort of 12 months between that point and actually getting married, it became clearer and clearer to us what it was about. And obviously a lot of that is really rather personal, that I would prefer not to share. But the parts of it that I am willing to share, like I said, in the Christian teaching of marriage, you become one flesh, and you don't just become one flesh. You're married in the sight of God. It's blessed by God. It's blessed by the church. And I remember thinking, actually, after we got married, what ridiculous pride, in a bad sense, is it for someone to say that I'm not married because a bishop, who in the historical church was considered to be equivalent to an earl, has signed off and said, they are a married couple. They are as good as me and my wife.
Right.
And for me, it's as well. It brings into what you say about equality. Like I say, it's a question of standing there and saying, yes, I'm a gay man. Yes, I'm married to another man, and I want to be a vicar, basically. And it's not just about the personal sides of it that matters to us. It's this question of saying, why should that matter to you? And I've spent God knows how many times arguing with other Christians about this, because that is, obviously, there's plenty of Christians, most Christians, who don't think that gay marriage should be allowed. I wouldn't say most Episcopalians, because we have gay marriage in our church, but most Christians as a blanket. And I've never had an answer to my argument in favor of it, but I won't bother you with that just now. We can come back to it if we need to fill time.
But I mean, you're absolutely right. It's marriage, regardless of the individuals involved, it's such a personal thing. It is that union. I mean, however you describe it, it is the Spice Girls. It's two becoming one, really, in some sense. It's like we are together in this. And so I totally hear what you're saying, and I think by that description of it, it perplexes me that we clearly don't, but many still define it as a male and female I must stop saying transaction, but it's like a union, a male and union, a male and female union. Jack, when that fruitful day potentially comes, would you debate whether you would potentially have a civil union or a marriage?
I know I would just have a marriage. I mean, I'm not religious, so just kind of, I don't know, but because I think for me, it's more the kind of the legal sense. Like, there's so many kind of things that, like wills, like, if it's a spouse and there's things that happen, and like, kind of grim things to think of. But, if you can, your partner's life support, things like that. Like, there's kind of lots of legal things that you can have if you're married, that kind of more so that's what I would go for. But I think it's interesting for me, the kind of the whole thing of like traditional marriage is just so interesting to me, because it annoys me that I think kind of I think that because it has been man and woman for such a long time, if it is two men or two women, it seems kind of almost lesser than. But what I think is annoying is people are like, oh, marriage is kind of this sacred thing. Yeah. There are people who, I feel like gay people, you would hope it's not been long enough yet, but there are like straight people who are like, oh, marriage is important. There are straight people who've been married 3 times, 2 or 3 times. It's like, so it's that, is it really that important? Or like, when, for example, a big thing, which really, pissed me off, is like that show Married at First Sight.
Yes.
I mean, it's different now, but I watched it. So I was in Italy and I watched it, and they had a version of it. So they were basically I don't know whether it's legal now, but they were basically suggesting 2 straight people can marry somebody they've just met, but 2 gay people who love each other and have been together for ages can't. Yeah. And so when the straight people are like, oh, traditional marriage, a man and a woman, what happens? People get married loads of times. People who get married in Las Vegas who just met each other, is that like a really sacred traditional marriage? Like, so it's kind of how marriage is seen, like in general, like straight marriage is kind of seen as sort of more than, which is just ridiculous to me. So it's kind of like, is it that important to people if you're getting married 2, 3, 4 times?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the rhetoric that spun about it being such an important thing, I agree with. But if it comes from exactly what you've just said, it's like, are you someone that stands up and says, well, actually a TV show where you just met someone and get married is terrible too, where you're like, well, actually you Henry VIII it, and you're like, don't fancy her now, I'm gonna go for her.
Yeah.
And then you plow through 6 women before you know it. That is not a sentence I've ever said in my life or hope to say again, but you know, it's demeaning. It's demeaning to us. It's demeaning to people who really feel like that union could mean something to them. To your point, Jack, about where it is legal, I am bewildered by this fact. There is 31 countries where it is currently legal to have same-sex marriage. Just to clarify that number again, 31. There's 195 countries that are legally observed in this planet. And only 31 of them. That's bewildering. And some of them, I mean, I am not going to sit and read 31 countries to you. In fact, you know what? I am going to sit and read 31 countries to you. Argentina, Australia, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Denmark, Ecuador, Finland, France, Germany, Iceland, Ireland, Luxembourg, Malta, Mexico, the Netherlands, who were the first to do it in 2001, New Zealand, Norway, Portugal, South Africa, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Taiwan, the UK, the US, and Uruguay. The reason I've read that is because there are countries that are not on there that stun me.
Yeah.
Stun me.
The interesting one that I think will probably surprise a lot of listeners and viewers is the South Africa, actually. That's one that people would expect wouldn't be on there. They've actually had it for quite a while. I think 2008 or something like that. And one of the reasons they had it was for an interesting reason, was that people know about apartheid in South Africa and so on. And a lot of ex-apartheid activists made the point that before 1994, as you were saying, Jack, amongst other things, it was illegal for a white man and a black woman to get married. So why are we saying that this is going for, you know, on a sex and gender orientation basis? And they thought, that makes perfect sense. And they're not just the only country in Africa where gay marriage is legal until very recently. And I mean, within the last couple of years, they were the only country in Africa where being gay was legal. Now I should clarify a bit and say most of the countries bordering South Africa, like Namibia and Botswana, for example, notably, I believe it is legal to be gay now. And even when it was illegal, it was hardly enforced, and attitudes were generally a lot more positive than what we associate with other countries like Iran or Uganda, for example. But it doesn't change the fact that until a couple of years ago, South Africa didn't just have gay marriage, but was the only country on the continent where being gay at all was legal, legally speaking.
To geographically put what Edward has just said into perspective, that is the 31 countries I've just read out. And I feel like that map is so telling. That's Africa down there with one country. This is the Western world, which on the whole is quite red on the western side of it. But zoom in, Italy, that you just mentioned, Jack, is not one of those countries. You know, there's so many in there that I'm just stunned at. And I mean, even closer to home, Northern Ireland only legalized it in 2019. That is very recent. So yeah, just stunningly worrying statistics. The positive thing is every year more and more countries legalize same-sex marriage. Thailand at the moment have put a bill forward. And it looks like they could possibly kind of legalize something. And, you know, I think we've kind of made a case already as to why it's so important for people, because there is that legal standing and there is that feeling of like knowing that you're not lesser than someone else. So, yes, I know I've spoken for so long there, but I kind of just want to put it over to other people. Are you stunned, surprised, or is it what you expected when we think about the countries that legally we could go to with a husband and say, yeah, this is my husband?
I think there are ones that are surprising. Like I was saying, when I was in Italy, I found that really surprising because being gay, like actually being gay, it was one of the places where being legal to be gay was ages and ages ago. I think it was like the 1800s, something ridiculous like that. So being gay has been legal for such a long time, and like loads of the artists were gay, like, you know, all the, like, you know, Leonardo da Vinci's and whoever, probably not him, but there's other people. And so, like, kind of being gay and kind of like part of the culture, but then the actual legal standing, maybe because of the kind of, you know, the Catholic stronghold, it's a bit like Ireland as well. So I remember I actually was working at an LGBT centre in 2015 when Ireland made it legal. And I think that a lot of people were saying that the kind of, obviously Ireland, the Republic of Ireland being a kind of Catholic country, quote unquote, I think it's the Catholic Church is sort of losing its grip in a way. So I think that's why, because I think with people there, they voted for it. I think it wasn't a kind of government thing. It was like people voting for it. Right. So a lot of people who were, you know, a kind of a certain generation were voting, all voted for it. There was that home to vote thing. I think we all came back to do it. So they're becoming a lot more liberal, I think. So.
Yeah. It may interest you to learn, Jack, that there was actually a Renaissance Italian artist who was called Il Sodoma. No bonus points for guessing the meaning of his name if I tell you it was spelt as Sodoma, etc.
Sodomy.
Yes, that's it.
You can sodomy now. Woo!
That's an in joke. Anyway,
but I know that there was one of them that, like, he used to have like male models when he was doing sculptures, and like David, like, you know, like Michelangelo, the David. Come on,
yeah. Who are you fooling?
Oh, I'm interested in the male form. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to put a slightly positive spin on it and say that I'm quite surprised that so many of those countries on the list do allow it, actually. Although you know, you have the usual suspects on there of Western Europe or most of Western Europe and the US and Canada and so on. Mexico's a bit of a curveball. I found that one out.
I'm surprised by that too.
And interesting that we mentioned a Catholic Church, because about, I think, a year or two ago, there was some confusion because the Pope had come out and said, no, the Pope didn't come out. That
I was like, what the fuck? What? Heard it here first.
Yeah, the Pope had come out and said that in the opinion of not only himself, but the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, gay marriage should be legal. And a lot of people didn't realize what he meant, neither on either side of the debate. And he's actually saying something what I think is quite interesting anyway, is he is not saying that the teaching of the Catholic Church is that gay marriage is okay. I obviously don't agree with them, but they think gay marriage is not okay.
Yeah.
But they also now teach that it should be legal. For the same reason, like, for example, the church doesn't approve of usury. The church doesn't approve of charging interest on loans. But they also wouldn't dispute that should be legal, because it's just, what they're saying is it's just a fact of the world we live in today. You can't, if you're having a secular marriage in a registry office, then the church doesn't have a right to say you can't do that. The church only has a right to say who can get married by them, was the point they were making. And I think that's an interesting point. I'd be intrigued to see if more denominations start moving that way, not necessarily an acceptance of it from a religious perspective, but saying that, yes, legally it must be allowed. I thought that was very interesting.
I think also as well, I think what is a weird thing is like the whole thing of like tradition. It's like there's kind of traditions that are good and can hold up. People saying about like, oh, this is tradition. But like, you think about things that were legal. It was legal to keep slaves. That was a legal thing you could do.
Yeah.
Public hangings were legal. Like shouting, oh, look, that person's a witch, burn them. That was legal. It's like there's certain things that kind of get made illegal or legal for reasons, you know, like, you know, it's just interesting, like, especially things that are like tradition. I think that's quite interesting that people kind of like, you know,
it's funny you bring up that. It's funny you bring up tradition, because I was going to say, when we mentioned it before, when we got married, my husband and I, both because of our own personal demeanors and tastes, and also because we kind of wanted to make a point, deliberately made our service as traditional as possible. It's quite rare these days that you get a couple that not only wants to be married in church, but wants to be married with dearly beloved, we art gathered here today in the sight of God, etc., like you see in films. You're still allowed to use that, but it's quite rare these days that people ask for it. But we used it. We went through the old marriage service, and we edited it slightly so that it would make sense with you know, I now pronounce you married rather than I now pronounce you man and wife and things like that. And I didn't hear this, obviously, because I wasn't walking out the back of the church in single file. I was off getting photos taken. But one of my friends told me, yes, we put an open invite to the congregation of our church to our wedding because we had communion at our wedding. So we thought it would be rude not to allow the whole not to invite the whole congregation if they wanted to come. And one of my friends said that they heard an elderly couple, and I know exactly who it was. Because, well, they're part of my congregation. I know who they are. I could work out just from the context of who it was. Very elderly, married just after the war. That's how elderly we're talking. And my friend overheard them saying as they came out of the church, Edward and John got married just like we did. And that was the point that we were trying to make, was that, and the other thing, like you were saying about straight people who just get married willy-nilly without thinking about how, you know, the ramifications of it. It's honestly surprised me that even though we were conservative is probably the wrong word to use, because obviously we were two men getting married, but aside from the same sex part of it, we had some of the most conservative viewpoints on what marriage itself is out of any of our friends. So that was... Oh, you okay, Tom?
No, I was agreeing, and then my phone went buzz. Apologies for that. Yeah, there it goes again. I swear it is actually on airplane mode. It's a calendar reminder. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I think people have this... I'm generalizing, of course. I think people have this image in their head that, you know, will come and put like pink unicorns in, and, you know, you'll ride in on a sea of drag queens, and, you know, you'll wreck what marriage is. But the reality is that if anyone's ever watched Don't Tell the Bride, I mean, gorgeous. Look at that.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Oh,
that was the only picture we made public, because I insisted on it. We had more done because John wanted more pictures done, but I insisted that was the only one that we frame or put on Facebook or whatever, because I long for the days when the only wedding photo you got was the couple in front of the church door and things like that, because now they spend 2 hours getting photos done next to a lock or something. Anyway,
yeah. And I mean, you know, marriage has changed over the years, and it can be so many things. It can be a couple in front of a lock doing a photo shoot. There's a couple I know that recently announced an engagement by doing, as is a weird American trend now, to do an engagement photo shoot to like your engagement. And I was like, you know, do you go you, but that just is like, whoa to me. So I think it's very contrived to assume, because you're allowing kind of queer people or same-sex people to get married, that it's going to ruin what marriage is. Because the reality is, as Edward's just said, for his marriage, it was conventional in every way except or one, I guess. Yeah, you say that. I mean, I want an all singing, all dancing wedding. What about you, Jack?
But this is the thing, which I think is interesting, is my other thing as well, which is, how does someone else's marriage affect you? Like, maybe if you're there, cool, but it's their wedding at the end of the day. It's like, there are lots, but you know, if someone wants to have a Disney themed wedding, not my cup of tea. However, that's down to them. I just think they're like, also, again, it's the gay people like ruining the tradition. Again, like thinking the straight marriage is high up. People who get married in Las Vegas. Is that like, you know, is that the glam, you know, is that like the tradition of like, and also as well, like the tradition of, you know, it has to be a virgin woman who's given by her father for some chickens. It's just like, come on, it's like the traditional marriage thing anyway. I traded my daughter, and also as well, like certain cultures where you know, there are certain things where kind of part of the culture, but people don't really necessarily agree with it. But you kind of have to accept that that's, you know, it's not your thing. Like, for example, you know, there are still some, you know, religions, cultures where arranged marriage is a thing, where people, they meet each other on the wedding day. You know, that's, you know, not something that I would necessarily agree with, but it doesn't affect me. You know, I'm not having an arranged marriage. So it's also kind of being respectful of, why should, you know, it's letting people, I get about equality, letting people all kind of be equal and doing kind of what culturally or they want to do, you know?
Yeah.
There's a fine line between say, you know, advocating for international human rights and doing so in a way which is so unthinking that you end up actually infringing upon the cultural norms of a place or time, you know. Or not time, because we don't go back trying to change what the law was in 1760, but you know.
That's it. I mean, you know, as we started this conversation, progress is an eternal thing. It's steady and it will always happen. And I guess a big part of that is regression in a way. Like, things will also regress, as we're well aware in this country right now. However, I think you shouldn't negate the fact that things did happen. Like, in the 1700s, this is how things were, and some of those things weren't good, and we shouldn't whitewash them because we learned from them. And I think that's why it's so important that people know what, like, Stonewall was, for instance, because the only reason that we have Pride is because of that riot. And equally, which is my perfect segue, actually, I would say, or if I would normally say it, I would say a perfect seagoosh, but here we are. That Stonewall wouldn't have happened without trans people. And yes, we're all cis people here, but I think it's something that I didn't know until today when I was doing research, that actually marriage equality hugely affects trans and intersex people because of their recognized genders.
Of course.
And therefore, if they are marrying someone of the opposite sex, a heterosexual marriage by any other means, if they are legally not seen as the gender that they identify as, they are not allowed to get married either. So even though that is a heterosexual marriage between two opposite genders, because that trans or intersex person is seen as a different gender from how they identify, they are not allowed to legally get married either in some countries. By some countries, I mean 164, I had to look at my maths there, countries where it is actually also illegal for them to get married. That's fucking bewildering.
I know the first one in the UK was 1952, the first time someone was illegally allowed to change their gender in order to get married. And the reason I know about that was because they're making a TV show about the person at the moment. And they were from Aberdeen, which I read the article about the other day. And I live in Aberdeen, and Tom used to live in Aberdeen. So, yeah.
That's liable, but yes. Please send me a link to that, Edward. I'd love to read more on that. That's really interesting. And we'll put a link in the video here for that too.
I think they were making a TV like series or something about that. Loving, I can't remember what the other person's called. Loving something, I can't remember what it's called. But the one with the interracial marriage as well.
Yes, I did hear about that. Sorry, I'm sending Tom a link now.
Oh no, that's okay. Something. Thank you very much. From an Aberdeen news outlet, no less. I think we're all sort of hinting towards media a little bit, and I think it's very important for us to note we are a theatre company, so I think it's helpful for us to have a conversation of art's place in all of this, like how, you know, we talked about artists themselves and their depiction of people of the same gender, perhaps. But like, as a theatre company, what can we do and what can artists do to continue to try and move forward something like marriage equality? I have one really, really bizarre reference point, and I just feel like this is the most heterosexual reference point I could ever make. So I'm so sorry in advance. But the TV show Friends, in 1994 had a lesbian wedding.
That's right.
And I just don't think people understand that they weren't the only TV show doing that, but this was a huge TV show throughout the world, and particularly in the States. And until 2001, what actually happened in that could legally have not happened anywhere in the world. And I just think that is so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's so mad.
What is interesting to me, and I could be wrong, I think that in media, in kind of mainstream media, they have very often it's two women who are both very feminine women, and that's maybe more like gay people that are like palatable. Like, for example, Disney recently, they've had in the Buzz Lightyear film, there's a gay kiss. And like that, some people it's caused uproar, like with certain things. But really interesting you were saying about that. So I remember vividly, because it was so awful, when marriage equality became legal in the UK in 2014, I think. There was a show on Channel 4, and it was something like My Big Gay Musical Wedding.
Yes, I do remember that. Yes,
so awful, and I don't remember thinking like, "Oh my god, gay people can get married. I'm so happy." I remember thinking, "What the fuck is this? What the fuck is this? We are not going to be taken seriously." I thought this is what I would have done if I was, head of content at Channel 4. Why not do a documentary that's like following gay couples as they get ready to get married, because it's, equal. They decided to do a musical singing the vows, and the vicar was singing, and like it was honestly just embarrassing. I was like, this is not helping straight people take us seriously, because they're like, oh, they're gonna have it, like you're saying, they're gonna have a big gay come on a unicorn, Cher impersonator, like all that crap.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, fair enough, if you want to do that, you do you, whatever. But it's just that, and I remember at the time thinking, what a shame. Like, it's equal. We want to be treated like the straights. Like, that's what we want here. But we're not going to be, because it's a big musical show joke thing. And it's such a shame. And like, and that was, nearly 10 years ago now. But I still remember it just thinking like, what a shame. Like,
I think it's a lot like the whole thing about, what I really want is a world where we don't have pride anymore because we don't need it.
Yeah,
sort of thing. I'm going to celebrate it while it's here, but and I certainly don't want it to go away anytime soon, because it would be better that we didn't need it in the first place.
Absolutely. And I think, Jack, your point is very valid, that it's wonderful that shows and media and whatever make such positive representation and try to, I guess, change people's minds and foster new viewpoints. But there is such a thing as bad press. There's Absolutely. That phrase, there's no such thing as bad press, but I think there is, because I think that I'm sure that couple, it was probably what they wanted, and that's great. But
it was the fact that they were used as like the representation for gay people. I was just like, but it's also as well, it's funny that you're saying about like bad representation. I love that they like sometimes include that with people who you're like, oh, don't include that. So like, for example, Cressida Dick, yikes, she is gay. She's gay, but they're like, oh, she's gay, like that's great. It's like, and then I think gay people are like, we don't accept her. Or like,
we really
saw an article about that. There was this drama recently with David Tennant being that serial killer, Dennis Nielsen.
Yeah.
And they were like, gay serial killer. And I was like,
what? I didn't even know.
Like, oh my god, he's gay. Work. He's a serial killer. That's not a good representation.
Oh, and fucking, where is he?
Or like John Wayne Gacy. They're like, oh, gay serial killer. I'm like, that's not a good representation.
This fella.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nicknamed the Grinder Killer.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, my husband was worried when Des came out, because Des was Dennis Nielsen was from Fraserburgh, which is right next to Peterhead. John was from Peterhead and looked like that and was gay and so on. So, but no one accused him of being a serial killer, so it was fine in the end.
But but that's the thing though. It's interesting that they're kind of like, that's the representation that you have. It's almost kind of like, I don't know. And like, this is a kind of controversial statement, but I was a little bit unsure about Queer Eye, because I think in a way it sort of almost was treating gay people like their characters. Like there was like, there's the hot one, there's the sassy one, there's, I don't know. And it's kind of like representation in media is kind of interesting, because it's a bit like Will and Grace, because like, I think that kind of, that was interesting. It kind of did quite a lot for, you know, kind of showing gay people on TV, I suppose. And I do think that kind of from what people have said, it was a very, because you never saw any kind of like, you know, intimate stuff, or like you'd maybe see them in bed, but like nothing. And so I guess it's kind of like, again, a very sanitized version. But you mean, it's getting there. It was early 2000s, so it's kind of sort of getting there slowly but surely.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people it is, or not so much now, but was in the last 20 years still a novelty. And a lot of people who almost certainly had gay family members, but didn't necessarily have any family members who had been out of the closet for at all, or let alone a long time.
Yeah.
So for a lot of people, it was still a novelty 20 years ago. For some people, it is now.
Yeah.
And these are not necessarily people who are intolerant, certainly not on purpose. But they need to be eased into it, I suppose.
Yeah. I should just correct my mistake from earlier. 1996 was the year of the Friends episode. Friends started in 94. But I think that, and there was TV shows like Roseanne and whatever that happened in the 90s, I think in part potentially paved the way for a change in thinking, a change in, and it's interesting you mentioned Will and Grace, and I think I've always been an advocate for the fact that I think comedy is the right vehicle to make change, because I think comedy makes you laugh, breaks down those barriers, and then allows you to change perception. And that is my personal artistic belief, let's say. And I think those shows that we've mentioned, Friends and Will and Grace and whatever, they're all humor driven. And I think it allows you to have moments that are genuinely beautiful, like two women getting married in Friends, and the episode is called like the one with the lesbian wedding. So you read that and you're like, ha ha ha, lol, and then you watch it and you're like, oh, beautiful.
Because I didn't realize, because I watched the like Friends reunion thing, that apparently, because I think David Crane, the like creator guy, I think he's gay. And there was apparently a talk that they were going to make Chandler gay originally, but then they didn't. So that was quite interesting. So again, I wonder whether, who knows, sometimes I wonder whether in media being a lesbian is more like palatable in a way.
I think, it can certainly, media representation can certainly be a double-edged sword, which I think is another thing that we're saying. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on the topic because of the makeup of the panel, but I was reading, well, I was aware of it anyway, but I was reminded of it a few days ago about early representations in American television in the 50s of black characters. And I don't mean blackface, I mean black actors playing black characters. And it was still overtly stereotyped. And that's a double-edged sword. You have a black character on the show, he might be a beloved character and everyone might love him, but if it's just a stereotype, is that what you want, sort of thing?
I think even the same can be said for, and don't get me wrong, it was exceptionally groundbreaking and I think has probably changed a million lives, but Queer as Folk, when it came out, the US version in 2002, obviously there was the UK version before that, but I think the US version paints a very, very beautiful picture of lots of very attractive, fit white men who have a lot of sex. And I think that's the stereotype. Obviously, Queer as Folk is back in a new form, which is really exciting. And it paints I have not seen it, but like the casting makes it look like it's a much more realistic picture of queer life. But I think that's why, pulling it back to like marriage equality, that's why I think it's so important in art that you make statements about these things, because I feel like we have a literal captive audience when it comes to art in whatever form.
I think what's interesting as well is that what you notice now is, I think certain media would maybe 10 years ago, say, some sort of gay media would only really be watched by gay people. Whereas I feel like now it's kind of more like there's a wider audience. Like, for example, more recently, I mean, I feel like I'm a bit too old for it, but like Heartstopper, that was like massive with like teenagers. And I mean, there's Heartstopper, there's Young Royals, there's Love Victor, and there's another one recently. There's one like about vampires or something that's like First Blood or something. I don't know, but that's like a girl one, and basically it's like a girl who's like I think she's gay and a vampire, like work, but I don't know. But like more stuff that's kind of gay themed, if you like, but then it's like it's reaching a wider audience as well. Like Heartstopper was so popular, and the fact it was kind of two boys, I think, was kind of irrelevant, which is great, I think.
Yeah. I think to use Heartstopper as a segue to the next point, obviously a lot of that story centers around a bisexual character and his sort of, I guess, sexual awakening to how he perceives himself and who he loves. I think I am interested that because there's so many countries where you can only marry the opposite gender, that for people who are bisexual, I wonder if that is a decision for them, that they go, well, I'm actually going to be in a relationship with someone that's the opposite gender purposefully, as opposed to me actively seeking out a wider selection of people and I'm pursuing that because they go, well, one day I would like to marry, and that has to be the opposite gender.
Yeah,
I do feel slightly sorry for bisexuals in that sense, actually, and well, in more than one sense, because it must be tricky, not just from what you're saying, but also almost from the opposite side. I have a gay couple that I'm friends with who are married. Well, I say gay. What I should say is a same-sex couple who are married, because as I only found out the other night, these are people I've known for years. I was on a Zoom to them, and I said, "You're both gay," and one of them said, "Well, actually, no, Andrew's bi," and I thought, "Oh, right. Yeah, I've clearly just assumed all these years that you're both gay because you're married.
Yeah,
you're in a same-sex marriage, but one of you is bisexual."
Yeah,
absolutely. And I fear for the oppression that marriage equality not existing in some of these countries has in countries where it is already legal to be gay or to be anyone on the LGBTQ spectrum. But I think, there are, the reason that strides still need to be made is because that oppression and that lack of equality exists in more than just legally being allowed to exist. I really quickly want to say that the chat in our online viewing platform of YouTube has been a bit mental this evening. And it's been entirely Zoe, who is usually on here doing dangerous dialogues with us. So hello, Zoe. Jack, she mentions that the thing that you were talking about is called First Kill. So there we go.
There you go.
Thank you.
I got you, lesbians. Don't worry.
There you go. Is that the representation you wanted, lesbians?
No, that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking of lesbian vampire killers, which lesbians, I'm so sorry for that. Like, that absolute monstrosity.
We had warning signs about Mr. Corden right back then.
I'm just reading Zoe's feed now. This is brilliant. Yes.
But I'm a cheerleader is meant to be amazing, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm a cheerleader, is that what you're talking about?
Because I'm a cheerleader.
Yeah. I mean, that show's just closed in London, and obviously the film has existed for a very long time.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping we'll squeeze it in somewhere. Unfortunately, we missed our dangerous dialogue last week, which was supposed to open our Pride Month this year, talking about conversion therapy, because I feel like it's a really hot topic, and I'm glad it's a hot topic. And things like Because I'm a Cheerleader are only going to kind of force that forward. But again, that's art's power, isn't it? To try and really bring things to the forefront.
I think also in media as well, I think that kind of seeing I think that obviously out celebrities, I think they're also being more open as well. Like if they are married, and like for example, I can think of like Neil Patrick Harris and his husband David, and also there's Holland Taylor and Sarah Paulson as well. So I think kind of seeing couples, and I know she's a bit controversial, but Ellen and obviously and her wife Portia as well, kind of being sort of out there and saying, this is my, you know, not just saying this is my partner, this is my husband or this is my wife. So kind of celebrities being more open about sort of their marital status as well.
Yeah.
That kind of, again, it's about normalizing it as well. I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Off the top of my head.
I think, you know, the thing that we're all hinting about is sort of representation in a way. I sort of, before we round up, I want to jump back a year. Jack, you were with us for quite a lot of our Pride stuff last year. And one of the topics we talked about was representation. And I wonder, has anything changed in the last year from your perspective in terms of queer representation in media, I guess, whatever strands that may have?
I think just more, I think there's just been more gay stuff that's come out, I feel like. So like, like we were saying, like there's Heartstopper, Love Simon, Young Royals, Love Victor. And even just like randomly, there's just kind of stuff coming in. Like, so like there was a thing on, I was watching this one called Disenchantment. It's like a kind of cartoony one. And she like has a relationship with a mermaid. So I was just like, oh, cool. But it's just like, again, just kind of normalizing it. I mean, maybe not a mermaid, but I mean, I'm all for mermaids too, if you want. But I think it's kind of like normalizing a gay relationship. Is it a gay relationship or is it just a relationship?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And also as well, like I think that RuPaul's Drag Race, it's become way more mainstream, you know, and kind of, you know, there are people on there who can talk about their husbands or, you know, their partners that they have, and kind of, it's just, you know, kind of again, like normalizing it. Like, I think for me personally, I think that some straight people think that gay people and straight people are hugely different, but they're really not. Like, you know, people want to get married, people, you know, there's probably gay divorces as well. Hopefully not yet. But I don't know, just kind of how it's like similar, like people want to do. And then I think, again, marriage is such a, I don't know, marriage as an institution is such a strange thing anyway. So kind of it's like sort of wanting to be a part of it. You know, it's like you're saying things maybe you don't want. Like, I mean, I think for me, like giving a girl away, like giving it from her dad to her husband, I think that's slightly weird to me, I think. But like, if that's what people want to do, you know, live and let live.
Well, it was one debate we had at our wedding, because we realized that was the only thing we couldn't do traditionally, was the giving away bit, because not only which one of us is the woman, but also if it's me, then my parents aren't here to do that. And if it's John, then his parents probably wouldn't want to do that. Not because they're homophobic, they're interesting people. Anyway, I love you, Jane and Charlie. If you're watching, you know what I'm talking about. You're probably not watching. Anyway, but so we ended up walking ourselves down the aisle, which I think is a nice. I think that's a nice way of doing it for both heterosexual and homosexual weddings.
I think, but also as well, like kind of sometimes you can't do the tradition. Like people being like, the tradition is that the father of the bride walks the bride down the. What if the bride's dad? Like, what if they, you know, what if they don't have a dad? What if their dad's, you know, passed away? Like, you can't be like, well, that's tradition. It's like, well, you can't necessarily always do the tradition, you know. So I think that's why. Also, as well, I think that people think that there are all of these rules that you need to have for a wedding. But you know, and if you want to do those rules, fine. But if you don't have to do those rules, you know, you can do whatever you want. If you want to, you know, it's like a white wedding dress. If you know it's straight marriage, you don't have to. If you want to wear, if you want to wear a Spider-Man cape, like go for it. Like there's a Shrek wedding. There was a Shrek wedding. That's not traditional marriage, but they dressed as Shrek and Fiona.
Do you know what? I'm sure it was Shrexcellent either way.
Exactly.
Can
I hope they had the onion carriage.
Can I be?
But then again, it's like we were saying. I think it's just the thing about like, the thing that I don't understand is how is it, you know, it's equal because it's like we want to be the same. Equal means the same, and like for me, like I'm saying, the traditional marriage thing, it bothers me, because how can people say to death do us part? Really, sometimes it's till divorce do us part.
Yep.
There are people who are married 2 times or 3 times. Hollywood is like the worst example for that. Elizabeth Taylor got married 5 times, was it? Judy Garland married like 6 times. Was every one of those marriages like really special? Mm-hmm. This is the one. Yeah. I think maybe on the 3rd time, it's maybe not for you. Like,
what a gay reference! I love how you.
Yeah, Liz Taylor and Judy Garland.
Specific woman's marriage.
Exactly.
I mean, my idol Audrey Hepburn is not exempt. I think she had 3. So
yeah, exactly.
Although one of them did die, I think. So she's allowed. That's a pass. You can you have that. Kind of, seeing as we come back to weddings, can I be really cheeky and segue back to something I said at the start about I've seen a rainbow blue plaque before.
Yes.
It's in York at Holy Trinity Goodrham Gate, which is a church in York, and it's a blue plaque with a rainbow border on the outside of the plaque. And it commemorates Easter 1834, when Anne Lister, who I will admit I don't know very much about, but I do know that she was a novelist and a lesbian, went to that church with her life partner. That's it. She went to that church on Easter 1834 with her long-term partner, and they took communion together. And that is popularly considered by many people to be the first gay wedding in modern Britain. The plaque does point out that it wasn't done with legal recognition, but it may have been done with the consent of the priest. It wasn't a special ceremony, it was just the normal service. But there is evidence to suggest that the priest who gave them communion knew exactly what he was doing and knew exactly what that meant to them. And they certainly viewed it that way themselves. So that's my segue.
But I think, unfortunately, I can imagine that history books were like, they were just dear friends.
Yeah.
They got married, but they were friends.
Yeah,
they were roommates.
Yeah, exactly. They were roommates. Yeah, but
lovely. We've kind of hit an hour, so I'm really keen to sort of wrap us up there. I'd love to go round everyone, as we've done in this more recent series of Dangerous Dialogues, and just ask what you're going to take away from this conversation. The whole reason we do Dangerous Dialogues is to encourage other people to have their own dialogues. You might hate things we've said, you might disagree with things we said, that's fine. You have your own conversation, and these conversations are for everyone. We might be 3 queer men who've sat and had this conversation for the last hour with Zoe on the side. But it really is a conversation for everyone to explore and see how they feel. So what do you take away from this conversation? Jack, let's come to you.
So I take away that it's no different. It should be called equal marriage and not gay marriage and straight marriage, because they're the same. And also, the one thing that I forgot to mention is that what bothered me at the time is when they were saying that gays can get married. And I was just like, just say people. Like, then we're not like a different species of people. Yeah. But I think that what I take away from this is that, it shouldn't have someone else, getting married. If you don't agree with it, it doesn't affect you, really, And also, I've actually never been to a gay wedding or a gay marriage, but I really want to go to one. So, and also, if you ever want to have some bit of entertainment, good media that's funny, is Saturday Night Live. There's a sketch that's called Xanax for Gay Summer Weddings, and it's brilliant, because they're basically saying about how they're like a straight wedding. They had a packet of crisps, and then the gay wedding, they got given tickets to Italy and $4,000. So it's great. They're just better, is what they're saying.
There's the Key and Peele sketch about the family taking notes about how a gay wedding works. Like, is it a gay priest, or is it a regular priest? Or or is it a sexy boat captain? And then he takes
exactly.
I love that. This is what the gays want. You need to talk about sailors. Edward, what are you taking away from this?
I'm taking away from it that I have a tendency to, I'm not going to use the word pessimistic, but others may, I have a tendency to focus on work that needs to be done rather than give thanks for work that has been done. And that's my main takeaway is how much has happened even in the last 10 years for the positive.
Yeah.
Obviously, there have been negative things that have happened, but it's important to remember the strides that we've made.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right, Edwards. I have come in with quite an angry viewpoint almost in this. Only 31 countries out of 195.
And you're right to feel that way about it. But
yeah, but you were right in saying actually that's 31 countries that didn't have, for all of us, that when we were born legally we wouldn't have been able to get married. So, you know, the marked progress is there, but there's still more to go. I think what I'll take away from this is that you know, progress is only made when you make it. And I think I from last year's Pride Month, I took away like this feeling to do stuff for like the queer community and feel like I could be part of that progress, not for me, but for other people. And I just feel that again from these conversations that, you know, as theatre makers, there's stuff that we can do to normalize, but also progress these things. And I feel like I'm very stimulated by this conversation in that way. Grand. Next week, Dangerous Dialogues are back once again with the delectable Edward Dickens. Is that the poses that you made in the wedding photos that we didn't see?
Yes, it is. Or maybe it's not.
Tasteful. But anyway, he's back again, back again, with the wonderful Valerie Christensen, who joined us a few weeks ago, and we're talking about how it's bizarrely still illegal to exist in so many countries. The topic being I am illegal, but I can't think of a better name for it. If you do think of a better one, do send it to us. But there's so many countries where, yes, you can't get married, but actually you're not allowed to live in those countries either. If you are gay, it is illegal. If you are anyone on that kind of queer spectrum. So that's our topic for next week. More food for thought there. Thank you so much, Jack, for joining us. A pleasure as ever. Obviously, thank you, Edward, for joining us. And thank you for it not being too unbearably hot during this. I think I'm grateful for that. I just really quickly want to close by saying we didn't mention the progress about coming out, which was the first Dangerous Dialogue we did last year, which, Jack, you were on. But I think it should be noted, Rebel Wilson came out in the last week or so. But was forced to do so. It was not her choice. She was kind of forced by a journalist, and that is utterly disgraceful. So I kind of just want to leave people on that thought that actually it's still very much a problem for so many people. There we go. Happy Pride, everyone. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.